For many people, the end of the year is about finishing strong and preparing for next year. And I like to reflect at the end of the year always and just give thanks and gratitude. And I was sitting down and writing some of the things that I could reflect on to share with the community. And so in this video, I want to share them with you. These are 10 things that I wish I would have known before starting business here on the continent of Africa. So welcome to the channel. My name is Ashley. On my channel, Ashley in Africa, I share my experience of living and doing business here on the continent of Africa. I'm also the founder of the Afrika Investors Academy, which is an online community of entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, and investors who are building location-independent businesses, remote-based businesses for the growth of Africa. They're building tourism businesses, they're building professional and personal development and coaching businesses, retreat businesses, agri-businesses, and content creation businesses. So if that sounds interesting to you, please be sure to like this video and check us out at the link below, Afrika Investors Academy. You'll find a great freebie there that you can download. But in this video, I'm going to give you some free information and valuable information, as I always do. And if you like it, please actually like the video, share it with someone who finds value in it, and subscribe to the channel. It's free. It's free. It really shows me that you value the content, and it helps the community and the network grow. So I've got my notes. I want to jump right in to number one, which is really important. So government is your friend. Knowing the legal and regulatory environment of the country that you're doing business in is so important. I'd say personally, I thought that I could just consult with people and get like the lay of the land, but the way that countries are developing in these developing countries, you want to get an idea of the legal and regulatory environment, especially when doing business as a foreigner. Nothing is like doing business where you come from. And when you do business in Africa, is a totally different game, and every country is different. So knowing the regulatory environment is really important. It's one of the reasons why I chose South Africa, because it feels a bit more straightforward, a bit more transparent, and a bit more open. And so that was why it was really important for me to build a business here, because there are a lot more favorable terms for foreigners that are doing businesses. I can identify the businesses that the government is favorable of, and potentially even work in tandem with the government. So if you've seen my last video where I had an opportunity to speak at the preparatory conference for the 9th Pan-African Congress, a lot of the work that I've been doing has been for the growth of Africa, making sure that I'm keyed in on the favorable industries that not only South African government, but other African governments have, so that I'm adding value, but also enriching the lives of Africans through entrepreneurship and community, which is the mission of the Afrika Investors Academy. So knowing the regulatory environment is good, it's key, and it's gonna help your business so that you don't go through a lot of the bumps that are unnecessary, and saving you a lot of time and money. The second thing is, as I mentioned, every country is different, and not only are there differences in regulatory environments and government practices and laws, but cultural differences apply. So doing business in parts of East Africa look different in Southern Africa, look different in West Africa, and knowing those cultural differences and being respectful of them is so key. There is nothing like, I think, connecting to culture in South Africa, and my just authentic desire to connect with the culture that I feel has helped me in just navigating the landscape. And so I'd find that also in doing business in Tanzania, where I ask questions and I ask how to formally greet and how to formally introduce and how to formally express gratitude, because all of that matters in different contexts depending on which country that you're in. Number three, which is a little bit muddy, and I'd ask that you do your research. Trade agreements do exist, and there are opportunities to explore them. So I was officially trained in the AGOA trade agreement, which is the Africa Growth Opportunity Act, trade agreement between several African countries as well as the US. And I learned a lot. I'm also learning to get more familiar with the African Free Continental Trade Area, which allows trade in between the countries. And while I'm still uncovering that there are definitely some challenges, knowing those agreements allows me to advise clients better, because not only are they still developing, especially the African Free Continental Trade Agreement or trade area, there's opportunity for growth and input. And so these are developing policies that you need to know about, especially if you're going to be in intracontinental trade, agribusiness, and exporting and importing on the continent. So knowing those agreements, just researching those. I'll link a couple articles to resources below, but if you have interest in learning any more about those agreements, feel free to leave me a comment below and I'll respond with a couple of resources for you as well. Number 4, you need a solid attorney and you need to do your research on them. Having an attorney is just great in general because you can ask legal questions, you can ask historical questions, you can collaborate and find different opportunities to engage and do business. And I'd say my first attorney that I worked with, I learned very quickly that their expertise was a bit different than I thought, but because they just had a desire to be helpful, they're a great resource and a great resource for certain things. And doing my research, I discovered I needed to identify and do more research on other attorneys that could help not only myself, but my community of entrepreneurs and investors as they're building their businesses, as they're investing in properties, as they're, looking for tax resources. The solid attorney is number 1, and starting with that, right? Not waiting until you get in a jam, but understanding the value of having a person on your team and supporting where you can to help them grow their business and vice versa. Is this resonating? Is this helpful? Please be sure to like it and share it with someone else who would find value. And number 5, so opportunities are everywhere. Take your time. It can get really overwhelming when you're coming from the West and you see all types of opportunities available, whether it's import, whether it's hospitality, tourism, retreats, education. There's a lot of opportunity here on the continent, and you don't want to do too many things because doing too many things is hard to let all of those things grow. I know, I'm speaking from experience. I currently am trying to juggle potentially like 3 businesses right now. And while they're all in the same scope, it's a lot. And so you want to be very focused on one key business, get some traction, build some revenue and cash flow, and then potentially jump into the next business. But I'd say take your time and focus on really what your strengths are and your bandwidth, because doing too many things is going to lead you nowhere. So understand that opportunities are everywhere, but just take your time. The next thing is knowing what is important to you and considering that one thing that is most important. I'd say for people that are desiring a life of ease when they move abroad, starting a restaurant is probably not the best idea. It takes a lot of work when you buy a job, and certain businesses are not easeful. It sounds good. It sounds great to, create a soul food restaurant in South Africa, which is very needed. People do desire that. But it's a very time and labor intensive. All right, so my camera cut out there, but we're gonna jump back into number 6. So understanding what is important to you is the most important thing to consider. So what's important to you? Is it a city environment? Is it being in a metropolitan place? Is it diversity? Is it a place where your children can thrive and flourish? Is it access to amenities, luxuries, and those things? And this matters because doing business, you need to feel creatively inspired. You need to feel, or sometimes you might need solitude. So depending on what your business is, knowing what's important to you, knowing if you need raw land, if you need a place where it's always sunny, those things really matter, because struggling is for the lazy. Right? We're not here to struggle. We don't come abroad to struggle, but sacrifice is for the visionary. So you may have to sacrifice some things to get what you want in the long term, but it all boils down to knowing what is important to you and considering that when making your decision on where to establish your business. My camera does not want to stay straight, guys. All right, number 7, relationships are number 1. So this probably should have been number 1, but it's not. It's number 7, but it's probably one of the most important things. So going back to the cultural aspect of the countries, I'd say this is pretty relevant no matter where you are in Africa. Relationships matter. It's the number 1 thing. And I think coming from the US, we operate through this very transactional mindset. Y'all are going to be so through with me, but we're going to keep going. So operating through this transactional mindset and way of doing business doesn't work here on the continent. The reason why white people do so well in Africa is because they've colonized. They've colonized the land with their language, with their religion, and some with their corruption. And so they do really well because they have influence over these countries. That's why they come to the continent and do well, establish businesses, establish communities, and people are in shock when they see these communities of Europeans doing so well. Well, they've had hundreds of years head start. But when people look at Asians and how they are able to do well, my hypothesis is because Asians are also very close to their culture. They're close to their religious practices, their languages, their customs. And so when they come to the continent, they recognize the importance of that and they can relate to that with people here on the continent. And so because they're so close to those things, they do really well. Americans, specifically African Americans, we tend to struggle because we have none of those things. We don't have the influence that the Europeans have, and we don't have the cultural customs and proximity to that Africans have along with the Asians. So the number 1 thing is to establish and nurture those relationships. It can take years to get your business off the ground without relationships and even with relationships. So prioritizing that, fostering those, and supporting people that are on the ground, building these genuine relationships, doing the vetting is something that you'll absolutely find value in. That's what we provide in the Afrika Investors Academy. I'm actively, as we speak, working with experts so that we can collaborate and I can foster these connections to people that are serious about investing, serious about doing business, and want to make sure that they avoid time and energy to vet their own experts. I always recommend doing your own research, but having these on the ground relationships is so key, and it will save you time, years of time, tens, even hundreds of thousands of dollars. The next thing is connecting with your diaspora. So in the beginning, when I first moved to the continent, it was very easy for me to kind of stray away. And I think in many ways that can be very important and set you up for success because you want to reconnect with people of the country that you're migrating to, that your new home country. You don't want to get caught up with staying in a bubble, staying in your expat bubble, and what that looks like. I do think that it's important to reconnect with your diaspora at some point because people that have been on the ground for years, they're going to have the insights and the relationships that you might need, as well as just the community. As I mentioned in a past video, being able to hang out with other African American women that have been here for 30 years, 25 years, 17 years, 10 years, 3 months. It was just a beautiful feeling of knowing that I'm not out here doing it by myself. And so there are people that can provide me with resources that understand what I'm going through. And I know that they value seeing me doing my own work so that when I do ask for help and support, they recognize that she's actively putting in the work. So they're oftentimes more willing to support me and to provide me with their resources as well. The next thing is flexibility. This life is not for the inflexible. So you have to be able to pivot where needed and just be flexible and moving with the flow. The bonuses to that is knowing your why. If you're fixated on one idea working out one way, you're probably not going to make it. But if you know your why, whether that is being on the cutting edge of innovation happening on the continent, or simply leaving corporate America because it's not for you, or being in a position to foster entrepreneurship as a value, as a core value in your family. knowing your why will keep you through the ups and downs of your flexibility. And so being flexible is so important. I've had to watch entrepreneurs and investors pivot many times, including myself, in order to sustain in their business and making it work here on the continent. And the last thing, but most important thing, is being in a community of like minds. You know, when you're doing something as courageous and as alternative as moving from your home country to the continent of Africa, wherever that is, there are going to be a lot of people that are not supportive of your vision. And so it is so important to be in a community of like-minded people who are doing the things that you want to do, so that you can stay motivated, so that you can have a resource, and that ultimately you have support. When you're in entrepreneurship and really doing anything at, matriculating through this life to achieve self-actualization, you need a support system. And most people are not going to be doing that work. And so to sustain and to grow and to evolve and really get to the next level, a community of like minds is going to get you there ultimately. And it's so important, whether you discover it on your own, you join a Facebook community, a WhatsApp group, or a community of people in your industry. It is literally the thing that will make or break your success. And so the community that we've created in the Afrika Investors Academy, we're at over 30 entrepreneurs all over the world. We're in the US, Canada, Paris, Zanzibar, mainland Tanzania, and also in South Africa. And we support each other through sharing resources and encouragement, because every entrepreneur, regardless of where they are in their journey, when they're doing work like this, you need a support system. And I love our coaching calls where other members are able to support and provide feedback outside of just me doing that, because it reminds me that this is actually one of the most important things to doing business that I wish I would have known prior to going into business, but because it was a problem that I was able to solve, we created that in the Afrika Investors Academy. And so there are several communities. It doesn't have to be the community that I've created, but if you resonate with this content, you resonate with my story, and you're an entrepreneur that wants to build a location, independent business in the areas of tourism, personal, professional development, coaching, agribusiness, content creation, we'd love to have you in the Afrika Investors Academy. So go ahead, subscribe, and click the link below. Join us. We'd love to have you. Kick off your new year by taking action on the goals and the desires of your heart and your dreams. Until the next video, we'll see you soon.